to sleep, Historia. Tonight, we open a window into the forgotten senses of the past. A world not seen, but smelled. Have you ever wondered what it was really like? To walk through the streets of ancient Rome, or stand beneath the pyramids at dusk. Beyond the monuments and stories lies another dimension, the air itself. What did it carry? What did it whisper? Tonight, we journey through time's unseen fragrance, through temples and tanneries, gardens and markets, incense and decay. You'll discover the aromas that shaped human memory long before history was ever written down. So settle in, let your breathing slow, let the modern world fade away, until only the ancient air remains. Before we begin, if you're visiting Go to Sleep Historian for the first time, please take a moment to subscribe and press the bell icon. It truly supports our work and helps us bring more calm journeys through time. And if you enjoy this story, we invite you to like and comment below. Share what you imagine ancient cities might have smelled like. Now, close your eyes. Breathe in slowly, and let's travel back to the scents that once filled the world. Opening the olfactory time capsule, the night is quiet now, and the world feels far away. You're standing in the soft half-light of imagination, a place between memory and dream. Here, the past does not begin with sight or sound, but with a breath, slow, deep, and curious. Take that breath with care, for it carries the scent of time itself. Most of us picture history through the eyes. We see the ruins, the statues, the broken columns, standing alone against the sky. We imagine marble floors and golden walls, crowds in the marketplace, the glitter of sunlight on a chariot's rim. But there's another side of history that hides behind the clean lines of those visions. Something that cannot be drawn or photographed. It is the air itself, the invisible atmosphere of life long gone. Every city, ancient or modern, has its own smell. It's the quiet signature of how people lived. To step into an ancient city was to step into a world made of scent. The nose told truths the eyes could not see. It whispered of life, raw, crowded, human life, and of the countless small acts that filled a single day. If you could walk the narrow streets of Rome, the air would not be still. It would be thick with smoke from hearths, sweet wine from taverns, damp stone after a morning rain, and something sharper that hinted at open drains hidden behind walls. The smell of the city was alive. It moved with the wind, mixed with the dust, and followed every person like a shadow. Imagine yourself arriving at dawn, when the city just begins to stir. The first smells are of bread, warm, yeasty, rising from the ovens of bakers who have been awake since the stars were still out. The scent drifts lazily down empty alleys, meeting the salt of the sea breeze if you're near a port or the dry earth if you're inland. For a moment, it feels like comfort. Then, another layer creeps in smoke, faintly bitter, from cooking fires and lamps trimmed with animal fat. You pass a stable, and the air thickens again. The smell of hay, sweat, and manure is strong, but not unpleasant in its own way. It is the smell of movement, of life ready to begin its work. Beyond that, a tannery opens its gates, and the stench turns sour and fierce. The workers there hardly notice. To them, this is simply the perfume of their craft. They talk, they laugh, they eat their bread amid the fumes. Our modern minds search for cleanliness, for the sterile and the safe, but ancient cities had no such illusions. To live among so many people and animals without plumbing, without sealed walls or trash removal, was to live in a swirl of constant odor. Yet, for those who lived there, these smells were not signs of filth. They were signs of life. The city's smell told you where you were. It marked every district. The potter's quarter had its sharp clay dust and kill smoke. The fish market reeked of salt and brine. The temple square offered something else entirely. The sweet smoke of incense and burnt offerings meant to carry prayers upward. A traveler could close his eyes and know exactly which street he had turned onto just by breathing in. In Tatsense, the air was a map. It guided you through the unseen. To smell was to know. If we could bottle those ancient scents now, even one moment of them, the shock would be immediate. There would be beauty and disgust, sometimes in the same breath. The harsh odor of refuse left in the sun would mix with the heady perfume of myrrh. The smell of rotting fruit might drift into the sweetness of crushed grapes. To our modern senses, trained by soap and sealed windows, such contrasts might seem overwhelming. But to the ancients, it was the natural rhythm of existence. The people of old did not flee from these smells. They worked with them. A Roman might hang herbs above his door to ward off bad air. An Egyptian might burn incense at sunset to cleanse a room. A Greek might anoint himself with perfumed oil before entering a crowded symposium, not only for vanity, but for comfort. To make the air around him bearable. Scent was not decoration. It was a form of protection, a kind of invisible shield against both disease and discomfort. Before germ theory, people believed that illness traveled on the wind. Bad air. Miasma was the enemy, so fragrance became medicine, and cleanliness meant something entirely different from what it does today. Yet there was something else hidden within those scents, something we often forget. Smell is memory. It is the oldest and most primal link between the body and the world. Long before words or books, a single scent could tell a person everything. Danger, safety, hunger, love. When an ancient farmer smelled the first cut of grass after rain, he felt hope. When a sailor caught the scent of pine from a distant shore, he knew he was near home. So tonight, as you listen and drift between waking and rest, imagine breathing in the air of those distant places, not the air of museums and ruins, but the air of the living past, when streets were alive with sound and scent, when every breeze carried a story. Perhaps you walk through a city gate, high stone walls around you, worn smooth by time. The gods nod as you pass, and the air changes. You are inside now, in the heart of a world long gone. The smell of humanity rises around you. Sweat, bread, animals, smoke, perfume. It is thick and real and full of meaning. You follow the street upward, past vendors setting out baskets of herbs. Mint, coriander, thyme. Their scents cut through the heavier smells, sharp and green. Somewhere nearby, a woman pours oil into a lamp. You catch the faint sweetness of pressed olives. The city feels alive now, breathing with you, whispering through. Scent the language of its people, and as you walk, you realize that this invisible history, the one you can only smell, is more intimate than any monument. Stones crumble, walls fall, but the air remembers. It carries what is forgotten. If you close your eyes, you might almost hear it. The soft hiss of oil on a brazier, the low hum of a morning crowd, the sigh of wind that once carried the smells of countless lives. They blend together, layer upon layer, forming a memory that never fades completely. That is where our journey begins, not with what can be seen, but with what can still be felt through the faintest trace in the air. We are about to travel through the cities of the past, not as sightseers, but as listeners of scent, explorers of the unseen. Each breath will reveal another secret, another piece of how people lived, loved, worked, and prayed. And as the night deepens, the ancient world will open itself to you, one invisible fragrance at a time. Breathe slowly now. The air of history is waiting. The city's breath. How smell shaped everyday life. The city was not silent, even when it slept. In the cool stillness before sunrise, the air already moved slow, heavy, and full of quiet messages. Smell was the first to wake. It rose from the streets, like breath from a dreaming body, carrying news of what the day would bring. To live in an ancient city was to live inside a living organism. The streets were its veins, the markets its beating heart, and the air, the invisible web of odors and smoke, was its steady breath. Every place had a rhythm, and every rhythm had a scent. The city was never still, because its people were never still. At dawn, the smell of damp stone and morning fires drifted together. Water sellers clattered down alleys with clay jugs, their feet splashing through puddles left from the night, the faint salt of sweat mixed with the mineral scent of wet dust. Doors opened one by one. Bakers brushed ash from their ovens, and the air filled with the soft sweetness of flour warming to life. A merchant rolled back a canopy and shook out spices wrapped in linen, releasing a sudden burst of cinnamon and dried pepper that startled the still air awake. Children ran barefoot through the narrow lanes, chasing each other past walls painted with faded colors. The smell of earth rose, where their feet struck the ground. In the distance, smoke thickened, cooking fires beginning their day, and somewhere unseen, an animal bellowed, its call echoing off stone. Every city, from Babylon to Athens to Rome, carried its own blend of odors. A fingerprint, made not from art or architecture, but from the ordinary, invisible traces of daily life. In Athens, the smell of olive oil and sun-dried herbs might mark the courtyard of a home. In Egypt, the warm, dry scent of sand mixed with sweet resin from temple offerings. In Rome, everything clung faintly to smoke, the kind that curled from thousands of small fires burning across the hills. But these smells did more than fill the air. They told people where they were, and sometimes what they worry. The rich smelled different from the poor. The senator's house, washed daily with perfumed oils, carried a faint fragrance of myrrh or rosewater that lingered in its halls. The alley of the poor told a harsher story. The sour temps of waste, the heavy scent of unwashed linen, the dense smoke of cheaper fuel. Yet even there, beauty found its way in the smell of bread or mint crushed between fingers to hide the odor of the streets. To walk through a city was to walk through invisible layers of identity. The marketplace was bright and chaotic, full of spice, sweat, and the raw scent of life. The baths smelled of soap and heat. The temples carried sweetness and ash. Even the sea breeze, when it reached the inland quarters, arrived changed, picking up dust, fire, and humanity until it no longer smelled of water at all. The people who lived in those cities did not notice the way we might. Smell was woven into the pattern of their thoughts. It guided them without effort. A housewife could tell if a neighbor had baked early, or if the baker down the street had used fresh grain. A sailor knew a port by its scent long before seeing the shore, the rot of seaweed, the pitch from ships, and the faint perfume of traded spices. And in every culture, there were those who tried to control the air. The Romans hung garlands of herbs over doors to keep away bad spirits and worse smells. Egyptians burned incense 3 times a day, morning, noon, and night, to please the gods and mask decay. In India, the scent of sandalwood marked the line between sacred and ordinary space. In China, incense smoke curled through ancestral halls, carrying prayers upward in slow spirals. Scent meant reverence. It meant care. It also meant survival. People believed, for centuries, that foul air carried sickness, that death traveled on the wind. They were not entirely wrong. The closer the crowd, the heavier the smell, and the faster illness could spread. So they fought back in the only way they could. With fragrance, perfume was not only luxury, it was defense. Herbs were medicine, not decoration. Even the act of sweeping the floor or burning oil became a ritual of health. But beneath all of that practical use, scent carried emotion. It tied people to their homes and their gods, to their loves and losses. A man might remember the smell of his childhood courtyard, damp clay and goat milk for the rest of his life. A woman might miss the smell of her husband's tunic after he left for war, a mix of leather, smoke, and salt. These memories stayed vivid, sharper than sight or sound, because smell reaches deeper into the heart. If one could stand on a high terrace above an ancient city and breathe deeply, the air would tell the story of a day in motion. Morning wood, smell of ash and bread. Noon, of sweat, dust, and sun-warmed fabric. Evening, of wine, fire, and fading light. Night, finally, would settle everything into a quieter blend. Smoke cooling in the air, the faint sweetness of oil lamps flickering low, and the dry whisper of sand as the wind moved through the empty streets. There were no perfumes strong enough to erase it, no walls thick enough to block it. Smell was the language of life itself, and though centuries have passed, that truth has not changed. Every modern city still carries a scent of its own, the damp of subway tunnels, the chemical sweetness of fuel, the comfort of coffee drifting from a cafe. The difference is that we rarely notice. We have forgotten how to listen with the nose. In the ancient world, no one could afford such forgetfulness. Their noses were their guides. To smell something burning might mean danger. To smell something fresh might mean food. The air was never neutral. It spoke. It warned. It comforted. It was alive. When night fell, the air changed once more. In the silence after the markets closed, when the last lamps burned low, the city exhaled all that it had held through the day. The streets grew still. The scent of dust and smoke softened. Somewhere, a fig tree released its sweetness into the cool air, mingling with the faint scent of a dying fire. A dog barked once, then quieted. The wind turned, and if you listened closely, you could almost hear the sigh of the city itself, a slow, invisible breath settling into rest. That was the rhythm of life, carried not through music or words, but through scent. Every dawn began with a breath. Every dusk ended with one. The people who lived then might never have thought to describe it, but they knew it well. It was the air they shared, the air that remembered them long after their stones had fallen. So as you drift now, imagine standing in that ancient night, feeling the same soft wind that once passed through narrow streets and open courtyards. Somewhere beyond the dark, a baker stirs his fire. A neighbor pours oil into a lamp. The city breathes again, and with it, the story of human life continues. Quiet, fragrant, and eternal. Waste and water. The scent of survival, the sun climbs higher now, and the gentle stillness of dawn gives way to the fuller breath of the city. The streets begin to pulse with footsteps, voices, and the slow rhythm of work. In that growing noise, another layer of life awakens, one that most people today would rather forget. It is the scent of waste, the steady reminder that survival itself always leaves something behind. In ancient cities, the boundary between clean and unclean was not drawn by distance or design. It was part of everyday life. There were no underground pipes, no sealed drains, no invisible systems to carry things away. Everything stayed close. Water, refuse, animals, people, all breathing the same narrow air. The city lived on itself, fed by its own remains. At first, it is only a faint note in the air. A passerby catches a whiff of something sour at the corner of a narrow alley. A puddle glistens where a gutter spills down from a roof. The water looks harmless enough, but the smell tells another story. It is the city's secret, and it cannot be ignored. In Rome, cesspits sat beneath houses, hidden but never sealed. They were cleaned by men who worked at night, hauling waste away in carts to be dumped beyond the walls. The work was low and hard, but it was work that kept the city alive. Without them, the air would have grown thick and heavy in days. Yet even with their labor, the smell never truly left. It drifted through the cracks, through courtyards and open windows, rising again each morning with the heat. Other cities faced the same problem. In Athens, waste and runoff was swept into open channels, where rain or luck might carry it away. In the great cities of Egypt, the dry climate slowed decay, but nothing could stop it completely. The Nile both gave and took it, carried life and filth together. The river was sacred, yet it was also the city's drain, its silent witness to the price of human growth. And so, the smell of waste became part of the natural order. People lived with it, learned from it, even found uses for it. Farmers collected what the city discarded and spread it on their fields. Tanners soaked hides in mixtures made from urine. Potters mixed ash with clay. What one person threw away, another turned to profit. Nothing was wasted because nothing could be. Survival was a full circle, and smell was the thread that tied it together. To the people who lived there, this air was not unbearable. It was familiar. Their senses were tuned to it. They could tell when the smell turned wrong, when something in the usual pattern shifted. The scent of waste was normal, but the scent of sickness or rot was not. They knew the difference by instinct. A strong nose was as important as strong hands, and there were places, even then, that smelled clean. Wells offered the cool freshness of deep water. Public fountains splashed with life. The smell of damp stone and flowing water was a comfort, a sign that at least for a moment, the air was washed. People gathered near fountains, not only to drink, but to breathe. It reminded them of what purity felt like. Bathhouses were the grand answer to the city's constant struggle with filth. In Rome, they stood like sanctuaries of steam and soap. The water was heated by great furnaces below, and though the air inside smelled of oil, sweat, and smoke, it was a welcome contrast to the streets outside. Men and women soaked away the day's dust, talking, laughing, and resting their tired bodies. For a few coins, a citizen could step out of the city as stench and into warmth and fragrance, even if only for an hour. Water was precious, and it carried its own scent too. In dry climates, people could smell rain before it came. The earthy sweetness that rose when dust met moisture. It was a smell that made hearts lift. The first drops on stone were a promise that wells might fill again. Even a short shower was enough to cleanse the air, to let people breathe without tasting dust and decay. But the same water that cleansed could also curse. When it sat too long, trapped in gutters or cisterns, it grew foul. Mosquitoes hatched, algae bloomed, and the smell turned sour and green. To the ancients, this was another sign of bad air, of sickness. They burned herbs nearby, hoping to purify what they could not see. The poorest parts of every city suffered the worst. Their families lived close together, their homes built almost upon each other. Waste piled quickly. Animals shared the courtyards, leaving behind their own heavy marks. A hot day could turn the air thick enough to taste, but even there, life continued. People learned to live above the smell, to find beauty in small mercies. The breeze that carried smoke away, the coolness of night that softened every odor. In richer homes, servants scrubbed floors with vinegar and herbs. Perfumed oils burned in small lamps. The wealthy masked the world with fragrance, but even they could not escape it completely. When the wind shifted, it reminded them that the city's breath was shared by all. Travelers often wrote of this difference. A Roman visiting Alexandria might note how the city smelled of fish and salt, while someone from Egypt might find Rome's air thick and smoky. Each carried their own standard of what was normal, and each city defended its scent as part of its identity. And so, the smell of waste was more than a burden. It was the background of human effort. Proof of survival. The same air that carried the stench of decay also carried the scent of food, of fire, of families living and growing. To remove one would have meant removing the other. Life and rot, always side by side, feeding one another as the city breathed. If you could stand above those streets now, high enough to see the rooftops stretching to the horizon, you would see thin lines of smoke, small flickers of light, and people moving like threads through narrow paths. And if you could breathe that air, you would understand something simple and profound. It was not filth they smelled, but existence itself. Every creature leaves trace. Every civilization carries its own odor. In those ancient days, people did not have the power to hide from their own presence. They smelled it, lived in it, accepted it. Their cities were honest, their air told the truth. And when night returned, washing the streets in cooler air, the smell soft. Fires burned low. The waste collectors made their rounds, their carts creaking softly in the dark. The wind turned toward the fields, carrying with it the breath of the city, heavy, human, and real. By morning, the air would clear again, ready to begin the cycle once more. The city would wake, inhale, and exhale, never clean, never still, always alive. That was the scent of survival, not pleasant, not pure, but enduring. It was the smell of a world that worked hard, that built, that broke, that began again. The smell of humanity in its rawest form. The honest air of the living past. Animals at the gates, hooves, herds, and hides. The morning begins again, and the sound of hooves comes first. It starts faintly, a soft clatter against stone, then grows into a steady rhythm that seems to pulse through the streets. Long before the city stirs to its full noise, the animals are already awake. They are the city's heartbeat, the unseen workers that make its life possible. In the ancient world, there was no clear border between the human and the animal. They shared the same paths, the same water, often the same homes. The smell of livestock was as common as the sound of voices. To live in a city meant living among creatures, strong, patient, loud, and sometimes stubborn, whose presence filled the air with a scent that could never be ignored. At the city gates, where the roads from the countryside met the walls, the smell hit first. It was the scent of travel, dust, hay, leather, sweat, and manure. Donkeys stood in rows, their flanks shining with dust and labor. Oxen pulled carts loaded with grain and amphori. Horses snorted, stamping the ground impatiently as handlers shouted and cracked whips. Chickens fluttered in baskets, and goats bleated in protest at being herded through tight spaces. To modern noses, the air would seem thick, almost unbearable. But to those who lived there, this was the smell of prosperity. Where there were animals, there was trade. Where there was trade, there was life. Every city had its animal districts. Near the markets, you would find butchers and tanners, leather workers and herders. Their trades made the air stronger, more complex layers of life and death interwoven. The tanner's yard was the harshest. Here, hides soaked in a mix of water, lime, and animal urine, softening until they were ready to be scraped and stretched. The stench could travel for streets. Workers smeared their faces with oil or chewed fragrant leaves just to bear it. Yet these same hides became armor, sandals, and saddles, goods no one could live without. In another corner, the butcher's block gave off its own unmistakable perfume. Raw meat, fresh blood, sawdust, and smoke. The smell lingered long after the work was done, soaked into the wood, into the earth itself. Stray dogs waited patiently nearby for scraps, tails wagging. The air buzzed with flies, and still the work continued, calm and unhurried. There was no waste. Every part of an animal had a purpose. Flesh, bone, hide, horn, even fat, which fueled lamps through the night. For most citizens, these smells were not disturbing. They were simply a part of the world, no more strange than the scent of rain or fire. Children grew up knowing them as familiar as the sound of their mother's voices. The smell of a stable meant safety, warmth, food, and motion. The smell of a slaughterhouse meant full bellies for days to come. Yet not all animal smells were harsh. There were moments of sweetness among them. Imagine walking past a row of camels at rest, their breath warm and dry, smelling faintly of grass in faraway deserts, or standing near a shepherd's pen, where the air holds the clean scent of wool, mixed with the calm hum of a flock settling down for the night. Horses, too, had their own beauty, that sharp, leathery aroma of strength and speed. Animals gave cities their rhythm. The oxen that pulled carts brought grain from the countryside. Goats and sheep provided milk and wool. Pigeons fluttered on rooftops, their coos echoing between buildings. Even dogs had their place. Guards by night, scavengers by day. The air was filled not only with their scent, but with their constant movement. At dawn, the shepherds would lead their herds out through the gates, and at dusk they would return, driving the tired animals back through the same narrow openings. Each evening, the gates became a swirl of sound and smell, the lowing of cattle, the clatter of hooves, the sharp temps of manure mixed with the faint sweetness of crushed herbs underfoot. Dust rose in golden clouds, catching the last light of the sun. The city exhaled its daily breath, full of life and labor. Inside wealthier homes, animals were fewer but still present. Cats wandered across courtyards chasing birds. Small dogs followed their owners through corridors, their paws clicking on marble floors. In Egypt, sacred animals, cats, ibises, and even crocodiles, were honored and perfumed in temples. Their bodies were oiled, wrapped, and buried with care. To their people, animals were not just tools or food. They were companions, symbols, even gods. Still, their smell never left. It clung to clothing, to hair, to the folds of the city's air. At the markets, the mixture of life and trade was overwhelming. The warm, fatty scent of roasting meat beside the fresh tang of herbs. The sweetness of honey beside the rough smell of dung. It was chaotic, but it was real. Travelers wrote of these sensations with fascination. One Roman visitor to an eastern city described the crowded perfume of the streets, half spice, half stable. Another spoke of a marketplace where the air tasted of sweat and cinnamon. They did not complain. They simply recorded what was. The smells told them where they were and what kind of life was being lived there. And through all this, water was a quiet salvation. At the city's edge, troughs and fountains stood ready for the animals to drink. The smell of water meeting dry earth brought a moment of peace. A clean breath amid the noise. Handlers wiped their brows, leaned against carts, and watched as their animals drank deeply, their sides heaving, their breaths slowing. That simple act of rest carried its own beauty. The smell of cool stone, wet leather, and calm after long travel. When night came, the gates closed, but the animals remained. Horses shifted in stables. Goats murmured softly in pens. The city slept with them, surrounded by the gentle hum of living creatures. Their warmth drifted through the air, mixing with the faint smoke of fires and the sweetness of straw. Even in silence, their presence was known. A slow, steady rhythm of breath and life that matched the city's own. Edis, isi na, in modern comfort. To forget that once every life depended on this closeness, on the strength of animals, their endurance, and the invisible ties they formed with humans. The smells that rose from that bond were not pleasant, but they were honest. They spoke of movement, of hunger, of work done under the open sky. To smell an ancient city was to know its animals. Not just see them, but feel their lives in the air. Every hoofprint, every grain of dust they stirred, became part of the city's breath. It was not beauty in the polished sense, but a deeper kind of beauty. The beauty of connection, of dependence, of survival shared between species. And so, as the moon rises over the quiet streets, the scent remains. A faint trace of hay. The ghost of smoke. The soft, musky warmth of 1,000 creatures sleeping beside their human companions. Together they form a single living memory. The memory of a world that breathed not only through people, but through every animal that walked its stone paths. The city inhales once more, the gates standing silent in the dark. Beyond them, the countryside waits, wide, endless, filled with grass and wind. Inside, the air settles heavy with the smell of labor and rest. And in that stillness, the story of hooves, herds, and hides continues, quietly pulsing beneath the stars. Smoke, flame, and the sooty sky, the day's work ends, and the city begins to exhale. The smell of smoke rises everywhere, soft at first, then thicker, curling through streets and over rooftops. It's the oldest scent of civilization. Long before perfume, before coins or scripts, there was fire. In every age, fire was both a comfort and a danger. Its warmth meant food, safety, and light. Its smoke meant life continuing after sunset. But the same flame that cooked the meal could take a house, or a street, or an entire quarter if a single spark landed wrong. The smell of smoke, then, was both friend and warning. As the sun slips behind the walls, hundreds of small fires come alive. Cooks bend over clay stoves, feeding them with twigs, straw, or small lumps of charcoal. The air fills with the crackle of flame and the slow, sweet smell of wood turning to ash. Food sizzles, and the night's first meal begins. From one home drifts the scent of grain roasting. From another, the warm perfume of onions and oil. Somewhere, a pot of lentils boils, releasing steam that smells earthy and thick. The smoke from each fire rises separately but soon becomes one shared cloud. It moves with the night wind, gathering above the rooftops like a gray ceiling. By the time darkness settles, every breath in the city carries that same note, a smoky haze that clings to hair, to cloth, to the skin itself. People go to sleep with it, they wake with it. In the narrow alleys, torches burn along walls. Their flames jump and sway, giving off a dry, resinous scent, pine, pitch, and smoke mixing into something both sharp and familiar. Each flicker paints a brief shape on the stones before fading. The air is alive with the low hum of fire breathing. Workshops stay open later than homes. The blacksmith's forge glows deep red, its mouth roaring. Each strike of the hammer sends out sparks that die in the smoky air. The smell there is heavy iron, sweat, and burnt charcoal. The smell of transformation. Nearby, potters tend their kilns, feeding flames through arched mouths as clay hardens in the heat. Their smoke smells different, almost clean, carrying the dried dust of earth turned to stone. Even temples breathe smoke. At altars, priests burn incense or bundles of herbs. The fragrances are meant for the gods. Cedar, frankincense. But they drift out into the streets as well, blending with the rougher smells of cooking and labor. For a brief moment, the air feels balanced, the sacred and the ordinary sharing the same sky. At times, the smoke changes. When the wind shifts or the wood grows damp, a sour note spreads. Something bitter, almost metallic. Everyone notices, but no one stops. They have lived with smoke all their lives. It is as much a part of the city as stone or water. Yet smoke also told stories. From a distance, travelers could see it long before they saw the walls. A thin, gray column meant a village cooking supper. A black plume meant disaster. A house or temple burning, a signal of loss. The smell carried messages before words ever did. A good day's smoke was mild and steady. A bad day's smoke bit at the throat and lingered too long. Within homes, fire had its own small rituals. Women blew gently on the embers, coaxing them to life in the morning. They stirred ashes, saving every bit of charcoal they could. Children learned early not to waste fire. The hearth was the center of the world, not just for warmth, but for stories, for light, for the slow passing of evening hours. Around it, families ate, mended, and prayed. Every flicker of flame cast moving shadows on faces and walls, turning the room into something half real, half dream. The smell of soot built up over time. It lived in rafters and corners, in the folds of curtains, in the fibers of clothes. When the rains came, the soot loosened, and the smell deepened wet ash, wood, and smoke mixing into a scent that clung for days. In grander homes, servants scrubbed the walls to keep them pale. In humbler ones, people simply lived with it. The black marks above the hearth were not dirt, but memory, a trace of every meal, every winter, every night spent by the fire. Cities learned to breathe with their own smoke. At dawn, the sky was pale. By midday, the haze began to form, and at dusk, the air thickened until the horizon blurred. Travelers often spoke of this, how the great cities seemed wrapped in their own gray cloak. In Rome, the poet Horace once complained that the smoke, the wealth, and the noise will drive even the strongest man away. Yet still people came. They came because smoke meant life, and silence meant death. Even in the countryside, the smell of burning filled the air each season. Farmers burned stubble after harvest, letting the ash feed the soil. Shepherds lit fires to keep wolves away. The landscape shimmered with small lines of smoke, each one marking a human hand shaping the land. And there was beauty in it too. The way light moved through haze, the way evening turned soft when smoke filtered the sun. Painters later would try to capture that glow. A city seen through its own breath. The scent might sting the eyes, but it gave the world a kind of depth. At times, though, the same smoke became terror. Fires broke out, easily spreading from roof to roof, leaping across narrow streets. In those moments, the air turned wild, thick, black, alive with sparks. People shouted and ran, carrying water in bowls, blankets in arms. The smell was overwhelming, burning wood, oil, and flesh. When the flames finally died, the air stayed bitter for days, a ghost of what had been lost. Still, from the ashes, life began again. People rebuilt, relit their hearths. And the familiar smoke returned, gentler this time, quieter. At night, the city finally settles. Fires burn low, leaving a faint red glow. The smoke thins, rising slowly into the sky until it disappears among the stars. For a moment, the air feels almost clean. A soft wind moves through the streets, carrying with it the faint smell of ash and cool stone. Somewhere, a last torch burns beside a gate. Its flame dances for a second, then fades. And yet, the memory of fire never leaves. It lives in the smell that clings to hair, to fabric, to breath. A scent so old that it almost feels like part of the human soul. To light a flame is to recall every generation before, every night when darkness seemed endless until fire made it gentle again. So the ancient city dreams beneath its sooty sky. Smoke drifts in long ribbons over rooftops, weaving together the lives of potters, cooks, smiths, and priests. Each breath of it carries history, the memory of warmth, danger, and survival. And as the moon climbs higher, the fires sigh their last, leaving behind only embers, small, glowing hearts, beating softly in the dark. In that dim red light, the city sleeps. Its breath smelled faintly of wood, of life lived close to flame. And in that scent, part sweetness, part sorrow, lies the oldest comfort of all. The quiet warmth of fire, still waiting for morning. Work and wonder. The industries that stung morning light spills across the waking city, catching on rooftops and drying the mist that lingers from dawn. The streets are already alive with movement, wheels creaking, tools clanging, voices calling across narrow lanes. The smell of the day's labor begins to bloom. It rises from open workshops and shaded courtyards, sharp and heavy, alive with sweat and smoke. Work in the ancient city was not quiet, and it was never clean. Craftsmen shaped, boiled, crushed, and scraped the world around them into something useful. Each trade carried its own scent, some almost pleasant, others strong enough to sting the nose and make the eyes water. Together, they created a perfume of labor, the breath of the working city. Near the edge of town, where the air is less precious, stand the you can smell them long before you see them. The odor rolls through the air, a mix of wet, hides animal fat, and lime. Workers, their arms dark and slick, knead skins in great vats of water and ash. Dogs bark somewhere behind them, for even their dung has its use here, softening the hides before they are stretched to dry. It is a trade few envy, but one that feeds many. The smell is fierce, clinging to every wall and stone. Yet to those who work here, it is simply the smell of their living. A little farther along runs the row of deer. Their workshops are brighter, though the air here, too, carries its own weight. Large clay pots bubble with colored water, indigo, crimson, saffron, violet. Steam rises, staining the ceiling with dark halos. When the cloth comes out, dripping and vivid, it fills the street with a faint sweetness, a strange mix of crushed roots, minerals, and fermented leaves. Workers laugh through the haze, their hands dyed to the wrist in brilliant hues. To them, the scent of dye is not filth, but art. The smell of color itself being born. Past them comes the clang of metal. The blacksmith's quarter never sleeps for long. Sparks leap into the air, ringing like small stars as the hammers strike. The scent here is dry and hot iron and sweat, soot and burning oil. Bellows groan as they feed air to the coals, and molten metal hisses as it meets the water trough. It is a living rhythm, the sound of tools shaping other tools. Children gather to watch the glow, and the smell of hot steel stays with them long after they run home. Across the street, the potters tend their kilns. Theirs is a gentler fire, but no less demanding. Clay dust covers their arms, their hair, their faces. The air tastes like baked earth. In the quiet hours, when the flames are steady and the smoke runs clear, there is even beauty in the smell, a clean, mineral note that speaks of soil and creation. When the pots emerge, still warm, they smell faintly of dust and sun. These will carry food, water, and wine. The scent of the kill will live on in every meal served upon them. There is also the reek of fish, for the city's people must eat. Down by the river, women gut and salt the catch of the morning. The odor is sharp and wet, mixed with brine and seaweed. The smell of drying fish drifts up the streets, clinging to everything. It is not pleasant, yet it is steady, dependable, the scent of sustenance. Beside it, The workshops of oil pressers fill the air with crushed olives and the faint bitterness of the pulp. Together, they paint a portrait of labor, unglamorous yet vital. Farther inland, the air thickens again, this time with the bite of vinegar, smoke, and resin. The leather workers bend over their benches, stretching and cutting the hides that once hung in the tannery. They oil them, soften them, and polish them until the smell becomes something new. Rich, earthy, with just a trace of the animals it once was. The finished goods, belts, sandals, satchels, hold that memory. When worn, each breath of movement releases a faint reminder of the workshop and the hands that made it. The people of the city are used to all this. The scent of work is as normal to them as the sound of voices or the sight of walls. Visitors may wrinkle their noses or pull their cloaks tighter, but those who live here breathe it without thought. They can even tell where they are by smell alone. The tanner's quarter smells of ammonia and ash. The metal street smells of smoke and iron. The cloth district smells faintly of herbs and dye. In this way, the city is not a single place, but many, each defined by its scent. And sometimes, within all this grit, there is wonder. A passerby might turn a corner and find a perfume maker's stall, where oils of myrtle, rose, and cedar drip slowly into glass jars. The smell there cuts clean through the city as a rougher air, soft, layered, almost holy. For a moment, the senses rest. Then the wind shifts, and the perfume fades, replaced again by the raw breath of work. Each smell tells a story of transformation. Raw matter becoming something shaped by human will. Clay becomes vessel, or becomes blade. Skin becomes leather. Leaf becomes color. The air may sting, but it sings of creation. The workers themselves smell of their craft. Their hands and clothes carry proof of their trade. To meet a man in this city is to meet his work, the faint trace of fish oil, of soot, of tannin, of dye. When the day begins to cool, the air softens. The heat of the workshops fades, and the sharper smells sink back toward the ground. A light breeze carries them away, weaving them into the larger fabric of the city. It's evening air, the smoke of kitchens, the scent of bread, the musk of animals returning to their stalls. The harsh edges blur, leaving only a quiet memory of labor done. Some historians today still find traces of those scents in the earth. When they dig into ancient workshops, the soil holds faint chemical fingerprints. Acids from dye, salts from leather, traces of metal. Even after thousands of years, the work still whispers. A shard of pottery smells faintly of smoke when warmed by the sun. A fragment of fabric, pressed between stones, carries a ghost of dye. It is as though the city left behind not just walls and words, but breath itself. And yet, for all the harshness, there was pride in the scent of work. Craftsmen believed that what they made had value precisely because it bore the mark of human effort. The smell of labor was proof of creation, the odor of civilization itself. Where the air smelled of nothing, there was emptiness. Where it smelled of sweat and smoke, there was life. As night falls, the workshops quiet. Fires cool to embers. The last clang of a hammer fades into the dark. A faint sweetness lingers from the DR's vats, mingled with the sharp note of leather drying. It is a strange harmony. Beauty and burden woven together. The workers stretch their arms, wash in basins of cold water, and breathe deeply. The air still stings a little, but it also soothes. Above the city, the moon rises into a hazy sky. From its height, the smoke and dust seem like a thin veil over the sleeping streets. Below, the smell of the day lingers, not pleasant, not terrible, but deeply human. The scent of creation, of motion, of hands shaping the world. And as the last worker closes the door to his shop, a soft silence follows. The city exhales once more. The air is still heavy, but beneath the stinging notes lies something enduring. The quiet satisfaction of work completed. The smell of industry fades, carried away on the night wind, leaving only memory, smoke, sweat, and the faint sweetness of wonder. Markets of the world, spices, oils, and sweet air morning returns. Slow and golden, a thin light spills over the city walls, and the streets wake again, not with the clang of forges this time, but with voices. The market is stirring. Before the heat rises, sellers spread their cloths, open their jars, and lift the lids from wooden boxers filled with treasure. The air begins to change. At first, it is faint, a trace of sweetness, a breath of warmth. Then it deepens. The scent of spices moves like music through the alleys, rising over the duller smells of stone and dust. Cinnamon, pepper, myrrh, and dried rose petals all mingle, creating an invisible cloud that drifts across the square. People follow it without thinking. The nose leads them more surely than the eyes. The market is the heart of the city, and smell is its pulse. Here, every scent has a story of travel, of trade, of human hands, passing goods from one world to another. The sharp sting of black pepper tells of faraway jungles. The sweetness of frankincense speaks of desert caravans. The smoky undertone of dried fish hints at the sea's endless edge. To walk through the market is to walk through all of them at once. A spice seller stands behind a low table, his wares arranged in bright pyramids. Turmeric glows like powdered gold. Cumin lies in dull brown heaps. Sticks of cinnamon rests like small scrolls, their curled edges dark as bark. When he leans forward to scoop a measure for a buyer, the air fills with a sudden burst of warmth, rich, dry, alive. He smiles as the wind stirs his goods, knowing that scent sells faster than words ever could. Across the aisle, another vendor crushes herbs with a wooden pedal. The smell is green and sharp, like the memory of rain. Basil, thyme, and mint spill across his board, their oils glistening in the light. Behind him, garlands of dried flowers hang from a rope. Lavender, marigold, rose. A few bees hum lazily between them, drawn by what little fragrance still clings to the petals. There are oils, 2 jars, and skins filled with liquid light. Olive oil thick and golden, sesame dark and nutty, almond pale and smooth. The oil pressers arrive early, carrying their goods in clay flasks, sealed with wax. When they open them, the air changes again. A faint bitterness mixed with sweetness, like fruit ripening in the sun. Women touch the oil to their wrists, testing its purity by scent alone. A good oil smells alive, they say. It smells like the earth that made it. The perfume sellers arrive later, their tables small but precious. They carry scents not meant for cooking but for the body oils of rose and lily, musk from faraway animals, and amber drawn from the sea. The air around them feels cooler, softer. The merchants dab a drop behind the ear, a hint on the wrist, and let the breeze carry it toward the crowd. In a world of smoke and sweat, perfume is more than luxury. It is a small act of defiance against the weight of the day. Everywhere, scent mixes with sound. The cries of sellers rise and fall. Dates, fresh figs, honey from the hills. Wooden wheels creak as carts roll in from the countryside. Donkeys bray. Coins clink. Somewhere, a pot of hot oil pops as a cooked fries small cakes, and the smell of sugar and spice draws children near. The air is thick, almost visible, a living swirl of flavors and fragrance. In the corner of the market, under a wide awning, stand the incense traders. Their goods are kept wrapped in linen to protect them from the sun. When they unwrap the bundles, a wave of scent rolls out. Dark, heavy, almost holy. Frankincense, myrrh, benzoin, and cedar. All breathe together in the air. The smoke of their burning will one day rise in temples. But for now, it is enough to smell it here, to feel the hush it brings even in the noise of the market. People pause as they pass, not always knowing why, only that something sacred lingers in that air. There are food scents, to the more ordinary, comforting ones. Bread baking in stone ovens, lentils simmering in clay pots, figs drying on racks. The smell of honey mingles with that of goat's milk and ripe fruit. To a traveler arriving hungry, this is paradise. To those who live here, it is simply home. The market smells change with the hour. In the morning, spices dominate, bright and crisp. By noon, the scent of cooking takes over. By evening, when the fires die and the wind cools, the sweetness of fruit and the faint musk of sweat fill the air. No 2 days smell the same. Rain sharpens the odors, dust softens them. Even the wind can change the story, carrying the spice scents up toward the temples or down to the river. For those who know how to notice, the market smell is a kind of map. A whiff of vinegar means the picklers are nearby. The scent of honey means the beekeepers have come down from the hills. A trace of smoke and resin says the incense traders have opened early. To walk blindfolded through the market would still be to know exactly where you stand. Beyond the goods themselves, there are the smells of the people. Linen damp with sweat, skin dusted with spice, hair scented faintly with oil. The city is alive with these mingled traces. When evening comes and the stalls close, the fragrance lingers long after the people have gone. It hangs in the air, faint but warm, like the echo of a song. Some of the scents here are fleeting. A cut fruit browns and loses its sweetness. A flower wilts, a puff of incense burns to ash. But some smells seem to settle deeper, caught in the stones themselves. Archaeologists today sometimes find tiny residues in ancient pottery, traces of sesame oil, wine, or cinnamon, still clinging after thousands of years. When those containers are opened in laboratories, the faintest ghost of smell escapes, a breath from the long-dead market. It's a fragile bridge across time, proof that the past did not vanish. It simply became faint. Evening draws near, and the market begins to dim. Sellers call out their last offers. Children chase one another between baskets, and the smell of dust rises as feet stir the ground. The sun sinks behind the walls, turning everything gold for a moment. The spice, the oil, the smoke, even the faces of the people. For a breath of time, the whole world smells warm and good. Then, slowly, shutters close. The stalls empty. A stray cat slips between the tables, sniffing the scraps left behind. The air, still heavy with spice, cools as the night wind moves in. The smells soften, cinnamon fading into dust, oil blending with smoke, incense become a memory. Far away, in the quiet rooms of homes and temples, these scents will live on. A drop of oil in a lamp, a handful of herbs on a hearth, a pinch of spice in a pot. The market has ended, but its spirit lingers in every meal, every prayer, every breath. And as darkness settles, the city breathes out. The sweet air of the market drifts upward, joining the stars, and the world falls silent once more. Perfumes, incense, and domestic fragrance. Even in the dust and noise of ancient cities, people longed for beauty. Not only to see it, but to smell it. The air around them was often heavy with work, smoke, and the scent of animals. Yet inside homes, temples, and palaces, another world waited, a world shaped by fragrance, carefully chosen and lovingly made. The city wakes slowly. The streets outside are filled with noise and trade, but within the courtyards, there is still calm. A woman kneels beside a small table, grinding dried petals with a smooth stone. Her fingers move gently, crushing them into powder before mixing them with oil. The smell is delicate, rose and myrrh, touched with a hint of honey. The air around her feels softer, lighter, as though the room itself is exhaling. For thousands of years, fragrance was part of daily life. Long before modern perfumes, people learned to coax scent from flowers, woods, and resins. They mixed oils and powders, burned herbs to cleanse the air, and rubbed their skin with fragrant balms. To them, scent was more than decoration. It was protection, medicine, and prayer. In small clay bowls, lumps of resin wait to be burned. When dropped on glowing coals, they release ribbons of smoke that curl slowly upward. The smell is deep and rich. Frankincense, with its sweet sharpness, and myrrh, darker and more mysterious. The smoke drifts toward the open window, carrying with it a sense of peace. People believe that such scents please the gods, drive away illness, and calm the restless mind. Perfume makers worked with precision and patience. They crushed flowers by hand, boiled bark, pressed seeds, and blended everything with oils of olive, or almond. Each recipe was a secret. In Egypt, priests guarded the formulas of temple perfumes, believing that certain mixtures held divine power. In Rome, perfumers sold tiny glass bottles filled with the essence of gardens far away. A single drop on the wrist could tell a story of trade routes that stretched across continents. The scent of perfume followed people everywhere, through streets, into temples, and across generations. A nobleman might anoint his hair with oil of cedar before attending a banquet. A young woman might burn jasmine in her room before sleep. Even soldiers rubbed fragrant oils into their skin, both to mask the smell of sweat and to feel human again after days of dust and battle. Inside homes, fragrance became part of the rhythm of life. Bread baking, herbs drying, oil warming in the lamp. Each scent layered upon the next. People placed bowls of rose water near windows so the breeze would carry its freshness through the house. They burned laurel leaves in winter to sweeten the air. Some stuffed small pouches with mint and thyme, tucking them into their clothes or hanging them beside the bed. The home was a world of scents that changed with the seasons, a quiet conversation between earth and air. In wealthier homes, servants carried small censers made of bronze or clay. They swung them gently as they walked, letting thin trails of smoke follow through the halls. The scent would cling to the fabrics, to the carved wood of furniture, to the hair of those who passed beneath. Visitors often spoke of this, how certain homes seemed to have their own perfume, something subtle but unmistakable. Temples held their own fragrances, older and more powerful. When a priest entered at dawn, the air was already heavy with incense, burned from the night before. The floors smelled of oil, the altars of smoke. The scent of sacrifice mixed with that of perfume, and together they created something both strange and beautiful. In such spaces smell became memory, the same every day, unchanged for years. Worshippers could close their eyes and know exactly where they stood by the scent alone. Perfumes also spoke of class and taste. The wealthy could afford rare imports, amber from the Baltic, musk from Central Asia, cinnamon from Ceylon. Poorer families used what grew near them, lavender, sage, rosemary, or pine. But even a small twig of rosemary burned in a clay dish could make a home feel different, gentler. In that way, fragrance was a kind of equality. Everyone, no matter how poor, could invite beauty into the air they breathed. There were also moments when scent held deeper meaning. During funerals, bodies were wrapped with resins and spices to mask decay and to prepare them for the next world. The smell of cedar and balm became the smell of farewell. In some cities, incense was burned at births as well, to bless new life and drive away unseen spirits. From first breath to last, fragrance marked the path. At night, when lamps burned low, the city's scents, soft, the shop smell of work, faded, replaced by the gentler odors of home. A faint sweetness of oil and herbs drifted through open windows. From nearby courtyards came the warm scent of bread cooling after the evening meal. Somewhere, a small censer still burned, its smoke rising in slow spirals toward the stars. In those quiet hours, fragrance was memory itself, the smell of one's home, of Lobodonis. Familiar places, all of it stayed in the mind, long after sight and sound faded. A traveler returning after ease could know his city by scent. Before he even saw its walls, each stone, each street, each doorway held the breath of those who had lived there. Modern researchers sometimes find traces of these ancient perfumes. In small glass bottles buried beneath ash or sand, residues remain thick, sticky, dark as honey. When opened, even after thousands of years, a faint smell escapes. Not strong, but real. A whisper from the past, reminding us that scent is the most patient of all memories. In the end, fragrance was more than comfort. It was identity, a way to belong, to feel Cleon, to connect with the unseen. The ancients knew that smell could shape emotion, could calm anger, awaken desire, or stir devotion. They understood something simple and profound, that to make the air around you beautiful is to make life itself more bearable. As the night deepens, the city quiets again. The wind moves gently through the alleys, carrying the faint traces of incense, oil, and bread. Somewhere, A single lamp still burns, its flame small but steady. The smell of warm oil fills the room, soft, human, alive. The people sleep, surrounded by the scents they made. In the darkness, the last threads of fragrance weave through dreams, rose and cedar. Smoke and myrrh, blending the sacred and the ordinary until they are one. And outside, beneath the stars, the ancient city breathes. Its air, rich with memory, rises into the night like an invisible song, the quiet perfume of lives long past, still lingering in the wind. Rituals of aroma, temples, funerals, and the sacred smell long before written prayers or carved statues. People learned to speak with smoke. They discovered that when they burned certain woods or resins, the air changed, the invisible became alive. In that moment, scent became a language, carrying their hopes and fears toward whatever waited beyond sight. Every temple, every tomb, every sacred space of the ancient world shared this understanding. The air itself was part of the ritual. In the quiet of early morning, before the streets filled with noise, the temples woke first. Priests walked slowly through shadowed halls, carrying small clay bowls of glowing coals. They dropped pieces of resin into the heat. Frankincense, myrrh, cedar, and balsam. At once, white smoke curled upward, twisting in the still air. It smelled sharp and sweet, full of mystery. The walls seemed to breathe with it, the carvings taking on new depth as the light shifted through the haze. To those who entered, the scent meant reverence. It marked the space as separate from the world outside. The temple smelled like nothing else. Part earth, part heaven. The same rituals repeated every day, and so the same scent filled the same rooms, year after year. Worshippers came to know it as the smell of prayer itself. It lingered in their clothes and hair, a reminder that for a few moments they had stood close to the divine. Across civilizations, from Egypt to Mesopotamia, from Greece to India, this bond between scent and spirit remained strong. In Egyptian temples, incense was offered 3 times a day, morning, noon, and dusk. Each time carried a different mixture, each symbolizing a stage of the sun's journey. The morning incense was light and sweet, greeting the rising light. The evening offering was heavier, thicker, meant to calm the gods as they slipped into the underworld. In Greece, temple incense was made from herbs gathered from sacred hillsides, thyme, rosemary, and bay. The smoke drifted through marble courtyards and open-air sanctuaries, blending with the smell of sea air and sun-warmed stone. Roman temples followed similar customs, filling the air with a mix of myrrh and imported resins from Arabia. The act of burning incense was called sufamen, a word that meant both purification and offering. To ancient peoples, scent was presence. The gods could not be seen, but they could be felt in the air. A place without fragrance was considered empty, lifeless. To burn incense was to invite divinity in. Every curl of smoke was a prayer, every breath a form of devotion. But not all sacred smells were gentle. At festivals or sacrifices, the air grew heavy with the scent of blood and burning flesh. For the ancients, this too was wholly a necessary act of exchange between humans and their gods. In some temples, the smell of sacrifice mingled with that of incense, creating a scent both terrible and awe-inspiring. To modern minds, it may seem grim, yet to them it meant gratitude, survival, and the fragile balance of life. As much as incense marked the beginning of life and worship, it also accompanied the end. The smell of death was something every ancient person knew. Bodies decayed quickly in the heat, and families went to great effort to soften that truth. They anointed the dead with oils, wrapped them in linen, soaked in resin, and surrounded them with burning spices. In Egypt, embalmers mixed myrrh and cedar oil to preserve the body for eternity. The process filled entire chambers with a sharp, bittersweet scent that clung to the air for weeks. Those who worked there would smell of it always, their hands and clothes marked by the craft of preservation. In Greece, the dead were washed with scented water and laid on wooden platforms surrounded by flowers. The smell of lilies and smoke drifted through the streets during funeral processions, mixing with the salt of tears and the dust of the road. Roman families burned myrtle and cypress beside the tomb, believing these trees guided the spirits safely onward. To the ancient mind, scent did not stop at the threshold of death. It was believed that the fragrance of sacred oil or burning herbs could comfort the soul on its journey. A pleasant smell was a sign of peace, while a foul odor meant unrest. Thus, funerals became acts of fragrance, the living's final gift to the dead. Some texts even describe miracles of scent. In early Christian stories, the bodies of saints were said to give off the odor of sanctity, a sweet, incorruptible smell said to prove divine favor. Centuries earlier, similar tales were told of heroes and gods. Fragrance, in these stories, was the breath of holiness, proof that the unseen world was real. There were also smaller rituals, quiet, personal acts that filled homes with meaning. A mother burning incense before a household shrine, a traveler lighting a twig of pine for protection before leaving, a widow keeping a pouch of frankincense beside her bed to honor a husband's memory. Each act was simple, yet sacred in its own way. Through scent, they felt connected to gods, to ancestors, to life itself. Even today, when archaeologists unseal ancient tombs or temples, traces of those old rituals remain. They find dark stains on altars, where oils once burned, or tiny grains of resin still clinging to a floor. Sometimes, when the air is still, they claim to smell something faint, not quite smoke, not quite spice, but something between. Perhaps it is memory itself, trapped in stone. Science may not prove the sacred, but it shows the power of these ancient substances. Myrrh contains antiseptic oils. Frankincense calms the mind and slows the breath. Sandalwood lowers the heart rate. What was once seen as divine may also have been medicine, a way to soothe body and soul alike. In that sense, the ancients were not only speaking to their gods, but also caring for themselves. The temple and the body shared the same purpose, to remain pure, balanced, alive. The smoke rising toward heaven was also a balm for those who stood beneath it. As the night deepens, the temple fires burn low. The priests finish their last prayers, and the final trail of incense drifts through the open doors into the sleeping city. Outside, the wind carries the scent down the streets, faint but still holy. A passerby pauses, breathing it in. For a moment, the world feels lighter, as though time itself has slowed. The smoke fades into the stars, leaving only a trace of sweetness in the cool air. And somewhere, far beyond sight, the gods inhale, the eternal exchange between heaven and earth, carried on the invisible wings of scent. Reconstructing ancient smells, science meets the past. The past once had a scent. It drifted through streets and temples, lingered in kitchens, and clung to the hair of those who lived and died long ago. Most of those smells are gone now, dissolved into the wind and forgotten by time. But a few still remain, trapped in the quiet patience of stone, clay, and ash. And today, through science, we are learning how to breathe them in again. Archaeologists used to study only what they could see: bones, pottery, tools, and walls. But the invisible world of smell left its own kind of evidence. In the last few decades, researchers began asking a strange but simple question: what did the past smell like? The answers came from fragments so small that most eyes would overlook them. Burned residue inside jars, traces of oil in lamps, grains of pollen caught between bricks. From those clues, a forgotten world began to open. In laboratories far from the ancient sites, scientists heat those samples carefully. The warmth releases tiny molecules, and special machines called gas chromatographs read their chemical signatures. Each one is a whisper of scent: resin from Arabia, olive oil from Greece, fish sauce from Rome. The data transforms into patterns, and those patterns tell stories. One such story came from Pompeii. When archaeologists opened the kitchens buried by Mount Vesuvius, they found sealed jars still holding dark residues. When analysts said the compounds revealed hints of olive oil, fermented fish, herbs, and even traces of burned grain. With that knowledge, researchers could almost picture the scene. The smoke from the hearth, the smell of cooking oil, the faint sharpness of wine vinegar. For the first time in 2,000 years, the air of a Roman kitchen stirred again. Another discovery came from the tombs of Egyptian queens, inside small alabaster jars, sealed since the day of burial. Scientists found remnants of ancient perfume. When the mixtures were reconstructed, they smelled sweet and woody, with notes of myrrh and cinnamon. Some called it the scent of Cleopatra, though the queen herself had long turned to dust. Still, the aroma filled the lab. Gentle, exotic, strangely alive. It was as if history had taken a breath and remembered. These moments reveal how scent connects the living to the dead in ways words cannot. A scroll can describe a perfume, but a single drop of it, recreated and inhaled, makes the past tangible. The air carries memory better than stone or ink. It enters the body, becomes part of breath, and stays there for a while. Modern researchers now call this field olfactory archaeology, the study of ancient smell. Through science and imagination, it joins chemistry, history, and art. Teams of scientists work with historians and perfumers to rebuild forgotten smellscapes. Together they mix resins, herbs, and oils based on the data, recreating the scent of markets, temples, or battlefields. At museums in Europe, visitors can now walk through these recreated smells. One exhibit lets them breathe the air of an Egyptian temple, heavy with incense, salt, and oil. Another offers the scent of a medieval street, sweat, bread, smoke, and wet stone. People close their eyes and feel transported, not by sight or sound, but by the oldest sense of all. Even cities long vanished to leave traces of their fragrance behind. In the ruins of ancient Mesopotamia, soil samples have revealed remnants of cedar and juniper, suggesting that wood fires once burned through the night. From Roman baths, residue of oils used for massages still clings to the stone basins. Olive, mixed with herbs like thyme and marjoram. In a Greek amphora found under the sea, faint chemical signatures of oregano and honey hint that it once carried seasoned wine. Each discovery adds another layer to our understanding of how people lived. It reminds us that the ancient world was not silent or clean. It was full of smell, good and bad, human and elemental. Through these small fragments, scientists are building a sensory map of the past, one molecule at a time. Reconstructing ancient scents is not easy. Time changes everything. Oils evaporate, resins dry, and air itself becomes an enemy. What remains is faint, fragile, almost gone. To find a smell is to find a ghost. Yet these ghosts speak clearly to those who listen. A few molecules of burned cedar or frankincense can reveal trade routes, rituals, and habits of care. A hint of perfume can trace the path of a queen's daily life. Sometimes, discoveries are accidental. In 2021, researchers opened a 3,000-year-old jar found in Egypt. Inside was a hardened lump that looked ordinary until heat from the lab lights warmed it slightly. At once, the room filled with scent. It was faint, but distinct. Sweet, smoky, with the bitterness of myrrh. No machine could have prepared them for that moment. It was pure connection, the breath of someone who had lived thousands of years ago. In another lab, a team worked on samples from an Iron Age village in Denmark. The soils still held traces of manure, ash, and pine smoke. When these elements were recreated, the smell was rough and earthy, not pleasant, but real. Visitors who smelled it during a museum exhibit said they felt closer to the villagers than they ever did looking at their tools. Smell, unlike sight, cannot lie. It makes the past human again. For scientists, the challenge now is preservation. How do you capture a scent that fades the moment it is found? Some turn to digital methods, recording scent molecules in chemical databases, creating olfactory fingerprints that can be mixed again later. Others are designing machines that release precise combinations of odor molecules to simulate the ancient air. In the future, you might walk into a virtual reconstruction of ancient Athens and actually smell the marketplace as it once was. Olive oil, smoke, dust, and distant sea wind. But the purpose of these reconstructions is not just curiosity. They remind us that our ancestors lived in full sensory worlds, richer and more immediate than our sanitized present. They inhaled their cities every day. The sense of labor, of ritual, of life. By understanding that air, we understand them more deeply. There's something almost tender about it. Science, with all its precision, is trying to recover something as fleeting as breath. It is as though humanity cannot bear to let go of its oldest connection, the moment when air itself carried meaning. When the scientists finish for the day, the lab lights dim. Samples are sealed again, stored in glass and darkness, but the air still holds a trace. Faint, ancient, stubbornly alive. The scent of time itself lingers there. Impossible to name, yet impossible to forget. And so, the work continues. Slow, careful, reverent. With every test and every breath, the past exhales a little more of itself. Fill in the present with memories once thought lost. The Smellscape projects, reviving the air of the ancients in recent years. A quiet revolution has begun in how we experience history. Museums and universities, working alongside scientists and artists, have started to rebuild not just what the past looked like, but what it smelled like. These are the Smellscape Project's efforts to let modern people breathe the same air that once surrounded ancient lives. The idea sounds almost magical. To step into a gallery and be met not only by artifacts under glass, but by the faint aroma of the world they once belonged to, the dusty warmth of a Roman street, the salty temps of a harbor in Alexandria, the dry sweetness of incense burning in a distant temple. These scents, recreated with science and imagination, make history come alive in ways no image or sound ever could. The process begins far from the museum halls, deep inside laboratories where chemistry meets storytelling. Researchers analyze residues found in ancient containers, soils, and fabrics. The results are then handed to perfumers, artisans who work with scent like painters work with color. Together, they recreate what those molecules once were: oils, resins, flowers, smoke, or even each reconstructed aroma is an educated guess, built from fragments of data and deep historical reading. One of the earliest of these projects began in Europe, where a group of archaeologists and sensory historians teamed up to create the smell of heritage. Their goal was simple yet ambitious: to identify, catalog, and revive the sense of historic sites before time erased them completely. They traveled across ruins, cathedrals, and ancient homes, capturing air samples and analyzing the molecules that still lingered. Some scents were obvious: wax, dust, and stone. Others were almost ghostly, impossible to describe yet undeniably present. From their work came replicas: the musty sweetness of medieval wood, the faint metallic scent of bronze tools, the sharp tang of ancient ink. These were not perfumes to wear, but experiences to enter, atmospheres to step into, to close one's eyes and imagine. At a museum in the Netherlands, visitors can now walk through a reconstruction of a Roman street and smell its layered air. The aroma begins with olive oil and baked bread, then shifts subtly to include smoke, animal waste, and dried herbs. It is not meant to be pleasant, only real. The air tells the truth that ancient cities were vibrant but crowded, alive but unclean. For many who visit, this honesty deepens their sense of connection. The smell becomes a kind of empathy, a bridge between centuries. In London, another project called Ad Europa uses artificial intelligence to map the forgotten smells of Europe's past. Historians feed thousands of old texts and paintings into computers, teaching them to recognize words and images related to scent, incense, perfume, rot, rain. From those clues, they rebuild sensory histories of entire regions. Once identified, these smells are recreated in labs, where chemists and artists work side by side. The results range from beautiful to shocking: the smoky breath of a blacksmith's forge, the briny scent of 17th century ports, even the sour odor of horse stables beneath royal palaces. Each recreation adds something unique to our understanding. A painting of a bustling market suddenly feels more alive when you can sense the mixture of spices and sweat. A letter describing a garden becomes vivid when the air around you smells of crushed mint and roses. These smellscapes turn imagination into experience. They let the body join the mind in remembering. Some museums take the idea further, building full sensory installations. Visitors might walk through a dimly lit corridor that releases faint puffs of scent at key moments, a whiff of incense near a reconstructed temple wall, the smell of charred wood beside a burned relic. These experiences invite people not just to observe the past, but to breathe it in. At first, some curators were hesitant. Museums are built on preservation, not emotion. But the more people encountered these projects, the clearer it became that scent has power. It breaks down the distance between now and then. You cannot argue with a smell. It bypasses thought, reaches memory directly. People leave these exhibits moved in ways they cannot always explain. Some describe it as intimacy, others as sadness, or it is the nearness of lives long gone, made real again through the simple act of breathing. Recreating these smellscapes requires careful judgment, too much accuracy, and the air becomes overwhelming. Too little, and the illusion fades. The goal is balance, to suggest, not to impose. A hint of cedar in the air can evoke an entire temple. A trace of baking bread can summon the hum of a forgotten marketplace. The mind fills in the rest, completing the picture. Smellscape artists often describe their work as translation. They translate from molecule to memory, from data to emotion. Some even call themselves olfactory archaeologists, though their tools are bottles and pipettes instead of shovels and brushes. What they dig up is not objects, but feelings. The emotional language of air, beyond museums. These ideas are spreading into education and digital media. Virtual reality experiences now include scent diffusers that release specific aromas at the right moments. A digital journey through ancient Athens might begin with the smell of olive groves, shift to sea air near the harbor, and end with incense drifting from a temple. In classrooms, teachers use simple recreations of ancient perfumes or spices to help students understand trade in daily life. For a child, one breath can explain more than a paragraph of text ever could. These projects are not without challenge. Smell is subjective. What one person finds pleasant, another may not, and memories attached to certain scents can vary wildly between cultures. Yet perhaps that is the point. The smellscape of history is not meant to comfort. It is meant to reveal. It reminds us that the past was real, filled with bodies and breath. Food and fire all bound together in the shared air of living. Late at night, when a museum is empty, the scent machines are switched off, and the halls fall silent. But for those who have walked through them, the smells linger in imagination, faint threads of memory hanging in the mind. A wisp of incense, the echo of bread, a trace of stone warmed by sun. These are not just curiosities. They are proof that history does not vanish. It evaporates, waiting to be inhaled. Again, in this way, the smellscape projects do something remarkable. They give voice to the most fleeting part of human life, the air we share. They remind us that every civilization left behind, not just buildings and words, but atmospheres. To breathe those again is to meet the ancients where they lived in the space between matter and memory, where every breath carries a story. And as the visitors leave, stepping back into the present, the modern air feels oddly thin. Clean, yes, but quieter. The world of the ancients may be gone, yet their air still follows us, invisible and eternal, a soft echo that waits for rediscovery with each new inhale. The lingering scent of history, memory, emotion, and connection. Long after a scent fades from the air, it continues to live in memory. It hides quietly in the folds of the mind, waiting for a moment to return. Sudden, uninvited, and deeply human. A breath of cinnamon might summon a childhood kitchen. The faint trace of smoke may recall a long-forgotten campfire or an ancestor's hearth. This is the secret power of scent. It bridges time, emotion, and memory in ways no sight or sound can. Historians often speak of written records and artifacts as evidence of the past. But the air itself once held a record to an invisible archive that carried the essence of life as it was lived. Smoke from sacred fires, perfumes that marked royal skin, the damp musk of stone corridors, all once floated through the same atmosphere we breathe today. Though gone from the world, these scents still cling to imagination, like distant echoes of breath shared across centuries. Modern science tells us why scent moves us so deeply. Smell is the only sense that connects directly to the limbic system, the part of the brain that governs emotion and memory. It does not pass through logic or language, it travels straight to feeling. That is why an old smell can make the heart ache, before the mind even knows why. A single inhale can reopen years, awaken loss, or bring comfort in an instant. For those who study history, This link between smell and memory opens a new way to feel the past. When archaeologists uncover traces of ancient perfume or the charred remains of incense, they are not just discovering materials, they are uncovering emotional technology. These scents once guided ceremonies, eased grief, celebrated birth, or prepared the dead for eternity. They were the atmosphere of belief itself. Imagine, for a moment, the funeral of an Egyptian noble, the air thick with myrrh and cedar resin, burning to honor a journey beyond death. Those same molecules once entered the lungs of mourners, each breath a mixture of sorrow and reverence. Thousands of years later, when a museum recreates that scent, we inhale not just a smell, but an emotion, one that has survived across millennia, carried invisibly through the chemistry of remembrance. In medieval Europe, churches were perfumed with frankincense and beeswax. These smells became the language of faith, as recognizable as music or prayer. For the illiterate, the air itself taught belief. To walk into a cathedral and smell incense was to step into sanctity. To catch the scent of tallow and wood smoke was to return to daily life. In this way, scent was a rhythm of existence, marking transitions between the holy and the ordinary. Even in humble homes, smell defined experience. Bread baking, straw drying, herbs hanging from rafters. These were the fragrances of comfort and survival. They wove family, labor, and rest together. When we read of home in ancient texts, it is not just a structure of stone or timber. It is a smellscape of warmth, smoke, and grain. To remember it properly, one must breathe it. Smell also binds us across generations. A scent once loved by an ancestor can return unexpectedly in the present, carried in a flower, a spice, or even a book sold paper. In that instant, we share a sense, literally, with someone who lived long before. It is a form of silent inheritance, a connection that requires no words. Perhaps this is why so many cultures tie fragrance to the soul. They believed that to smell something deeply was to touch its essence, to take a fragment of the spirit within oneself. Some modern researchers describe this phenomenon as olfactory time travel. Unlike sight or sound, which rely on context, smell operates on emotion. When you smell something from your past, the body reacts before the brain translates. You do not remember the memory. You relive it. The heart quickens, the eyes soften, the mind drifts. It is as if time folds inward, and for a moment, the distance between then and now disappears. Museums and historians who work with recreated scents understand this delicate magic. When they introduce the smell of ancient olive oil or desert wind into an exhibit, they're not trying to simulate the past. They're trying to awaken empathy. A visitor may never have walked a Roman street, but the smell of dust and bread can make them feel that they have. Through scent, history becomes not a story told to the mind, but an experience lived by the body. There is something beautifully human in that pursuit, to reach backward, to breathe the same air as our ancestors, and to feel for a moment that we understand them. It is a reminder that the past is not gone, only diffused. The same molecules that once drifted through ancient temples now float in our modern world, recycled endlessly through earth and sky. We are, quite literally, sharing breath with history. In the quiet of night, when one lights a candle or burns a hint of incense, it is easy to imagine how such acts once filled entire civilizations with meaning. The flame flickers, the air warms, the scent expands, and for a moment, the room becomes a bridge between ages. The whisper of resin or the sweetness of wax carries us into a slower rhythm, the same rhythm that guided monks, queens, and commoners alike. The air becomes a story, unfolding molecule by molecule. And just as scent once shaped belief and memory, it also shaped emotion. Empires rose and fell beneath skies, thick with smoke and spice. Love letters carried traces of oil and flowers pressed between pages. Soldiers marched to the smell of leather, iron, and earth. History has always been fragrant, joyful, bitter, and alive. Today, we live in a world where air is often sterilized, scrubbed clean of identity. Yet, deep down, we still seek the comfort of scent. The smell of rain, the aroma of tea, the faint musk of old wood. They remind us that we exist within time, not apart from it. Each inhale is a connection, a silent agreement with every human who ever breathed before us. For the listener closing their eyes now, this is perhaps the gentlest truth of all. History is not just written in stone or ink. It floats unseen, around us and within us. It drifts through homes, through dreams, through the quiet spaces where memory lingers. When you breathe slowly, you join an ancient conversation, one spoken not in words, but in air. Somewhere, long ago, a potter bent over wet clay, breathing in its earthy scent. A mother stirred broth, scented with garlic and herbs. A monk inhaled the sweet smoke of candle and prayer. None of them could have known that, thousands of years later, someone would try to remember their world not only with eyes and hands, but with lungs and heart. The smellscape projects may end their exhibits, and the laboratories may close for the night, but the deeper work continues. Within every breath that stirs memory and emotion, the air we share carries their essence still. To breathe with awareness is to touch eternity. And so, when you next catch a faint, familiar scent drifting through the evening, something you cannot quite name, pause for a moment. Somewhere in that breath may lie the trace of another age, another life, another heartbeat echoing through time. The scent fades, the memory stays, and history, invisible yet eternal, continues to live quietly in the air between us, rebuilding the ancient perfumes. Science meets art. The search for lost scents begins not in temples or tombs, but in laboratories, quiet, gleaming rooms, where the air hums softly with machines and curiosity. Here, modern scientists and historians become dreamers. They do not merely dig for relics. They listen for whispers trapped in ancient glass, pottery, and ash. Their goal is simple and poetic: to breathe what our ancestors once breathed, to bring back the fragrances that once floated through forgotten streets. Inside these labs, sealed amphitheater from shipwrecks are opened after thousands of years. The air that escapes carries molecules older than any written word. Researchers lean close, careful not to disturb a single grain of residue. They analyze it through mass spectrometry, gas chromatography, and other tools of invisible precision. The data forms a pattern: traces of olive oil, myrrh, beeswax, cedar, or resin. A chemical signature of memory. Through this science, ancient perfumes are reborn. In the modern world, we might call it reconstruction. But to those who hold a deep reverence for the past, it feels more like resurrection. It is as if time itself takes a breath, reminding us that history was never silent, it was scented. One of the most famous examples comes from the city of Pompeii. Buried under ash and silence, it preserved fragments of a perfumer's shop, bottles of solidified oil, bits of crushed flowers, and resin dust remained locked in volcanic time. When scientists began analyzing these materials, they discovered traces of rose, cinnamon, myrrh, and a strange resin likely imported from Arabia. From these hints, perfumers crafted what they called the scent of Pompeii, a fragrance both floral and smoky, sweet yet sorrowful, a bottled echo of a city that fell asleep under fire. In Egypt, another scent emerged from the sands: kifi, a sacred perfume once burned nightly in temples. Ancient texts listed its ingredients in poetic fragments: honey, wine, raisins, myrrh, cinnamon, and juniper berries. But only through residue analysis and experiment did modern researchers discover the exact proportions. When they recreated it, the smell was unlike anything in today's world. It filled the room with warmth, fruit, and spice, a fragrance both comforting and powerful, a scent that once guided prayers toward the stars. Rebuilding such scents is not only a scientific act but an artistic one. No machine can fully recreate how a smell felt, how it changed a space, how it shaped emotion. That is where perfumers enter the story. They interpret chemistry like musicians reading old notes. They blend oils and resins, seeking to match not only molecular formulas but atmosphere, the soul of the scent. Together with archaeologists, they craft something that bridges art and evidence. The result is not merely perfume, but an experience of time restored. In Greece, archaeologists unearthed alabaster jars that once held precious oils. Through analysis, they identified hints of lavender, sage, and orris root scents used for cleansing both body and spirit. A modern Greek perfumer, working from these findings, created a fragrance inspired by those ancient recipes. When visitors smell it today in museum exhibits, they describe a strange feeling, recognition without memory. It is as if something deep within them knows the scent, though their mind cannot explain how. Perhaps this is what makes olfactory archaeology so moving. It bypasses reason and speaks to something older than thought. To smell what our ancestors smelled is to stand beside them for a moment. Not as historians, but as humans. Modern researchers have even revived the scent of Queen Cleopatra's perfume in a site near Mendes. E.g., archaeologists found perfume jars preserved for more than 2,000 years. Inside were residues rich with olive oil, cardamom, cinnamon, and myrrh. After years of study, scientists recreated the formula. The perfume was thick, almost honeyed, with an aroma that lingered for hours. It was not the delicate fragrance we might expect, but a bold, intoxicating blend. A scent meant to command attention, to leave an impression long after the queen had gone. In that fragrance, one could almost feel her presence. Confident, intelligent, and aware that scent, like power, was a form of persuasion. Beyond individual perfumes, researchers are also exploring the broader smellscapes of ancient life. Using molecular analysis, they reconstruct not just what a perfume smelled like, but what a marketplace, a bathhouse, or a temple might have smelled like in its entirety. Imagine standing in an exhibit where the air changes as you walk, the warm scent of bread fading into the temps of leather and bronze, then softening into incense and flowers. It is not just history displayed, it is history inhaled. These immersive projects, such as the Smell of the Past initiative in Europe, are transforming museums into sensory archives. Visitors no longer just look at artifacts behind glass, they experience the air that once surrounded them. The response has been powerful. People close their eyes, breathe deeply, and often describe an unexpected intimacy with the ancient world, as though time itself becomes porous for a moment. Some scientists even argue that by understanding ancient perfumes, we can learn more about cultural psychology. The way a civilization chose to smell what they found pleasant or sacred reveals how they viewed the world. To the Romans, the sharp scent of resin and citrus meant cleanliness and order. To the Egyptians, the sweetness of myrrh meant holiness and life beyond death. To the Greeks, earthy herbs meant balance and harmony with nature. Every culture shaped its identity not just through sight and sound, but through smell, the silent language carried on the wind. The art of ancient perfume making was a craft of patience. Oils were infused for months, even years. Ingredients traveled across deserts and seas. To create a single drop of perfume was to blend continents and climates: cinnamon from India, frankincense from Arabia, rose from Syria, and myrrh from the Red Sea coast. Each bottle was a map, a miniature world of scent. When we recreate them today, we are not only reviving fragrance, we are reviving connection, the global breath of humanity, long before the modern age. And yet, there is humility in this pursuit. No matter how exact the formulas, the air itself has changed. The soil, the flowers, the resins, all have evolved. What we recreate can only ever be an echo, a respectful attempt to touch the untouchable. Still, there's beauty in that. Perhaps what matters most is not perfect accuracy, but the act of remembering the willingness to breathe the past again, even if faintly. In this quiet way, scent becomes both science and art, a partnership between evidence and imagination. Historians trace the molecules, perfumers translate them into poetry. Together, they remind us that the world of our ancestors was not black and white, but fragrant and alive. Every city, every person, every ceremony carried a signature in the air. When night falls over the laboratory and the machines grow still, the scientists often pause. The faint aroma of their recreated perfumes lingers in the room, soft, warm, ancient. It is not hard to imagine that somewhere, in that delicate cloud, the spirits of those who once mixed oils and resins might still drift, curious and proud, pleased that their art has not been forgotten. And as you listen now, breathing softly in the quiet of your own space. Perhaps a trace of that memory reaches you to a scent that does not belong to this hour, but to eternity. The air is never truly empty. It carries what once was. It carries what remains. And in that invisible perfume, that fragile, eternal bridge between past and present history exhales, and the story of scent at last comes to rest. And so, our journey through the air of the ancients comes to rest. The markets have gone quiet, the incense has burned low, but their fragrances linger, faint, eternal, drifting through memory. Tonight, we have walked not only through history's streets, but through its breath. We've learned that the past was not silent, it was scented, alive with both sweetness and sorrow. Each inhale carried a story, each exhale a connection to those who came before us. If this story brought you peace or wonder, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Go to Sleep Historian. Your support helps us continue to bring these gentle, thoughtful stories from history's quiet corners. And in the comments below, tell us, what ancient city would you wish to smell for a single night? Until next time, breathe softly, dream deeply, and let the past guide you gently to sleep.